Alright, on this Memorial Day, it's time for a rare double-header review, where one race was good and the other one was fucking trash. Let's get into it. This is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of The Fuel, where today we're going to be reviewing two races that happened over this past week in the Cup Series. On Wednesday night, they had the second of a doubleheader at Darlington Raceway with the Toyota 500K, which was a 500-kilometer race. And yesterday, they had, of course, the Memorial Day Classic, the Coca-Cola 600, which probably isn't going to be considered a classic, especially not with me, I'll tell you that much. And it turned out there was a pretty significant driver penalty that was assessed after the race, and there's probably going to be a big one that's going to be assessed for something that happened before the race. But we're going to get all of that. We're going to be talking about that here in a bit. But first, before we get into all this, there's a few things that I wanted to talk about real quick in this edition of News of the Week. Alright, so not very much this week in terms of headlines, but one thing I wanted to talk about was the Xfinity race at Darlington, which had one banger of a good finish between Chase Briscoe and Kyle Busch. So, coming to the last lap of the race, Briscoe actually scraped the wall pretty good, which allowed Kyle Busch to get underneath him, and it looked like Kyle Busch was going to steal the win away. But my goodness, did Chase Briscoe, he said no moss on that shit, and he drove the wheels off it. The two actually rubbed together in turns 1 and 2, and Briscoe actually scraped the wall again. It was actually very reminiscent of the 2003 Cup finish between Craven and Kurt Busch, which I still consider one of the greatest finishes of all time. And man, you want to talk about someone who had the heart of a champion, and this was coming, and this was such a big win for Briscoe, and he honestly needed to win this race because earlier in the week, he and his wife Marissa basically had a miscarriage and lost their child that was due to be born in December, I think I said it was. And I mean, that really sucks. And you could see the emotions that were coming out of him and Victor when he got out of the car. He couldn't, once he got out of the car, I mean, he couldn't hold his emotions in anymore. Which I don't blame him one bit. I mean, after going through something, that traumatic, and then to come back and win this race in the fashion that he did, I think it's safe to say that Chase Briscoe has shot up to the top of a lot of fans' favorite list. Because after going through what he went through this week, and then to win in the fashion that he did, I think he's going to become a huge fan favorite. And I'm pretty sure when 2021 rolls around, there will be some Cup teams, perhaps, that will be giving a look at him. Although I don't know if Stewart-Haas wants to give him up at this point. Because he's been, ever since he's gotten in their Xfinity car, he's been doing really good. So, one of the most emotional wins that I've personally ever seen. And for good reason. Let's shift to some IndyCar news real quick because they just released an updated schedule. It's a 14 race schedule, which is a bit of a dip from the usual 17, but of course with the whole COVID-19 bullshit, that's kind of a thing that's been happening. But here is what the new schedule looks like. So, the 2020 season for the IndyCar Series, it will premiere at the Texas Motor Speedway on June the 6th. But then they take a month off after that. That'll be the only race in June. And then July gets really busy because they're going to go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course twice. They have quite a few double headers that they're going to be doing. Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course twice, but not back to back. The first one will be on July 4th, which is a doubleheader weekend with NASCAR. And then the second one will actually be on October the 3rd. So the season is actually going to be extended all the way into October this year, whereas it usually ends in September. Should be extended to October anyways. It should be going from March to October in my opinion. But anywho. So they'll be having 2 races at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course, but they'll be spread apart. But then they're going to have back-to-back doubleheaders. They're going to have 4 races in 1 week. Holy shit. I just now saw that. Boy, they're going to be fucking busy too. Because they're going to have back-to-back Road America races on July the 11th and 12th. And then they're going to have back-to-back races at Iowa Speedway on the 17th and the 18th. And then in August, we have the race at Mid-Ohio. And then they're going to hold the Indianapolis 500 on August the 23rd. Which I believe is the first time ever that they're holding the Indianapolis 500 in a date that is not Memorial Day weekend. Because a lot of times, because the only times that the Indianapolis 500 has not been held on Memorial Day weekend is when they canceled the race for the World Wars, and in this case it was because of this fucking COVID-19 pandemic. So it's going to be held August the 23rd. That is going to be weird, having this race not, be held on Memorial Day this year. But, it is what it is, and at least we're going to be getting it later on this year. And then on August the 30th, they go to Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. And then they finish up with all road courses. September the 13th, they go to Portland. And then they have another doubleheader, this time at Laguna Seca. So back-to-back races at Laguna Seca on September the 19th and the 20th. And then in October, they go back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course. And then, in a bit of a shocker here, St. Petersburg is going to be hosting the season finale. Usually, St. Pete is the season opener for the IndyCar series. But, of course, with the COVID-19 shit, that they weren't able to make that come to pass. But, apparently, they've gotten the okay to run the race on October the 25th, and that will be the new season finale for the NTT IndyCar Series in 2020. This is just freaky, man. What a weird schedule. But you gotta do what you gotta do, and with this whole COVID-19 crap, this is what they have to go with. So it is what it is. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the race reviews. First of which, the Toyota 500K at Darlington, the first Wednesday night race since the 1984 Firecracker 400. Wonder who won that race. But anywho, let's get into the race reviews, starting with the Toyota 500K. Alright, so here we go. The Toyota 500K at Darlington from this past Wednesday night. The starting order was, of course, determined by finishing position from the 400-mile race with the top 20 inverted. So as a result, Ryan Preece would start from the pole due to his finishing in 20th in the previous race. The race was delayed several hours due to rain, which was a pretty big factor, which has been a pretty big factor in the last couple races, which kind of sucks. So the race finally begins. Ty Dillon actually led the first lap, and then we get our first caution on lap 4 when John Hunter Nemechek spins in turn 3, backing into the wall, which kind of sucks because I think he had top 10 run in the 400-mile race, so that kind of sucks. So Ty Dillon leads on the restart. Logano and Blaney gets by Preece for second and third, and then we have our first pure lead change on lap 9 when Joey Logano gets by Ty Dillon. DiBenedetto challenging for second, but drops back to fifth after he had to back off. Second caution on lap 2 when John Hunter Nemechek spins down the backstretch this time. Might be time. It might have been time to take that one to the garage and just say screw it. Several drivers going for service, but nobody could fuel the car because of the competition caution on lap 25. Because again, no practice. Logano leads on the restart. Ty Dillon gets in front of Logano off of turn 2 because he got a good restart, but then Logano gets back around him in turns 3 and 4. Blaney and Boyer get by Dillon for second and third as he begins to backslide. Excuse me. Boyer gets by Blaney for 6th, and then we get our third caution on lap 26, which was the competition caution. So everyone comes in for service, obviously, and it was 4 tires all the way across the board because it's Darlington, and it eats tires like no other. Boyer actually wins the race off pit road. Clint Boyer was actually really good in this race, but yeah, the ending was not so pleasant for him. So initially, Eric Almirola was penalized for an uncontrolled tire, but then NASCAR reviewed it and saw that the reason for the uncontrolled tire is because the crew member, the tire that the crew member was holding was hit by another car and he lost control of it as a result. So they rescinded the penalty and allowed Almirola to reassume his position where he came off the pit road. However, Brennan Poole was caught for speeding, so you can't really avoid that since that's all electronic now. Bubba Wallace stays out and leads on the restart. Boyer gets by Bubba to retake the lead on the restart, so no pure lead change there. Elliott, Austin Dillon, and Ryan Newman go 3 wide off of turn 4, which was pretty exciting. I would say this race was a lot more entertaining than the 400-mile race was because there was a lot more passing, a lot more lead changes, and it was just crazier all around. Had some tight racing in the mid-pack. Boyer by Logano for the 3rd position, and then Truex gets by Logano for 4th. Truex gets by Bowman for 3rd. Bowman reporting they scraped the wall just a teensy bit. Truex gets by Blaney for 2nd with 4 to go in stage 1, but Clint Boyer ends up winning stage number 1. Everyone comes in for service, and Boyer wins the race off of pit road. Weather is approaching from the southwest, but we're still good for the moment. And as long as we get to the halfway point, which in this case the magic number was 114, because this was a 228 lap race, then we would have an official race. Boyer leads the start of stage number 2. Priest looked like he had an engine failure, but he managed to get it to the pit lane. And like I said, magic number's lap 114. Caution number 4 comes out on lap 72 when Chris Buescher gets spun in turn 2 by Michael McDowell. Everyone comes, well, some drivers come in for service, but the top 14 did not stop. So Boyer leads on the restart. Kenseth cuts across Blaney's nose on the front stretch and almost gets turned. Then we get our 5th caution on lap 83 when Ricky Stenhouse spins out off of turn 2. Most of the field comes in for service. Boyer wins the race off pit road, but Martin Truex Jr. stays out and inherits the race lead and leads on the restart. Bowman starts slicing and dicing through the middle of the field. Boyer gets by Dillon for the 4th position. Ryan Blaney with an unscheduled stop after smacking the wall pretty significantly. Boyer gets by William Byron for the 3rd position. Harvick takes the lead from Martin Truex Jr. down the front stretch for our 2nd pure lead change on lap number 100. Harvick slightly brushes the wall off of turn 4, but still keeps going. Our 6th caution would come out on lap 108. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay. 6th caution comes out on lap 108. Cole Custer scrapes the wall and loses the right rear tire. And basically left the carcass on the track, so they had to go and pick that up. Everyone comes in for service, and Boyer once again wins the race off pit road. So his crew was on the money in this race. Rain actually started popping up to the west of the track, but he did manage to get to the halfway point at this point. Well, after the restart they did. Boyer leads on the restart. Race reaches the halfway point, making the race official, so yay! Elliott gets by Truex for the 2nd position. Eric Jones gets by Byron for 4th, and Harvick gets by the 24th for the 5th position. The leaders have to split through some lap cars as Clint Boyer wins stage number 2, so he wins the 1st and 2nd stages. Everyone comes in for service, and this time Harvick wins the race off pit road. And of course that's due to the fact that he has the last spot on pit road. Newman and Buescher stay out as rain is in the area. However, it would not come until much later in the race. So Ryan Newman leads the start of stage 3. Boyer tries to get around him in turns 3 and 4, but Newman, of course being Newman, makes it really, really hard to pass. Eric Jones goes 3 wide with Boyer and Newman to take the lead on the restart. Newman with a left rear tire rub. Boyer finally gets by Newman, but it's for the 4th position, which shows, how that battle affected both of them. And then we get our third, and of course that ended up with our third pure lead change of the day on lap 134. I had to go back and double check, make sure that was a pure lead change, and it turned out it was. Because Jones had not actually officially taken the lead until the next lap after. Newman actually led that lap because they were 3 wide across the line, and Newman actually ended up leading the first lap after the restart, so it counts as a pure lead change. So there's that. 3 pure lead changes, which was already more than the 400-mile race. Kyle Busch up into the top 5 after a rough week. Jones skims the wall just a bit, but it actually did enough damage to affect the handling of his car a little bit. And that allows Chase Elliott to chase him down, and he slingshots past Jones in turn 3. Jones fights back with a crossover down the front stretch, but Elliott eventually prevails, and we get our 4th pure lead change in lap 161. Hamlin gets by Boyer for the 4th position. Denny Hamlin by Harvick for 3rd, and by Jones for 2nd, so Hamlin was starting to come towards the front. Kyle Busch gets by Harvick for the 5th position. Kyle Busch and Clint Boyer start fighting hard for 4th as Truex closes in from behind. Truex gets by Busch for the 5th position. Clint Boyer by Jones for the 3rd position. And then we start seeing green flag pit stops. Kyle Busch was the first of the leaders to come in for green flag stops. Elliott pits from the lead on with 52 laps to go, and then a monkey wrench thrown into the works. Caution number 7 on lap 178 when Matt Kenseth loses the right rear tire and spins on the apron in the middle of green flag pit stops. Excuse me. The top 4 had stayed out, and they were the only ones left on the lead lap, including Brad Keselowski, and of course that's the usual for that 2 team. So Brad K comes in for fresh tires, as does Brennan Poole, who also stayed on the lead lap. But Chase Elliott, I think, was also able to stay on the lead lap. He had made his pit stop, but was able to get back around the leader to get back on the lead lap. So there's that. He leads on the restart with 42 laps to go. Hamlin and Keselowski start fighting hard for the 2nd position. Keselowski challenges Elliott for the lead as Hamlin chases in the 3rd position. And he actually gets ahead of him off of turn 4 and leads at the line for a 5th pure lead change of the day on lap 191. But Chase Elliott powers around the outside and takes the lead back. That's our 6th pure lead change on lap 192. We have our 8th caution on lap 195 when Clint Boyer smacks the wall and cuts down the right rear tire and spins in turns 3 and 4. So a great night goes bad for Clint Boyer. Everyone comes in for service. Kevin Harvick wins the race off of pit road, but Denny Hamlin stays out and inherits the race lead. Matt DiBenedetto stays out and inherits 2nd. So Hamlin leads on the restart with 29 laps to go. We had 3 wide to the field. Chase Elliott moves up to 2nd and is trying to challenge Hamlin for the lead. But then we get our 9th caution on lap 200, and this one caused quite a bit of controversy. Chase Elliott gets spun out of 2nd place by Kyle Busch on the front stretch after it looked like Kyle misjudged getting back into the line because he tried to get underneath of Elliott, but Elliott had to run on the outside, and Kevin Harvick was closing in from behind, and Kyle tried to get back in line and misjudged it and hooked the 9 into the inside wall. Chase was none too pleased with Kyle Busch, giving him the finger afterwards, and Alan Gustafson also came down, as well as the 9 crew, and was basically staring a hole at that 18 car. Although, after the race, Kyle Busch basically owned up to it and said, yeah, that was my fault. And even Kevin Harvick even said that, yeah, it looked like he misjudged it. And let's not forget that Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch have had their own run-ins over the years, including one at Darlington back in 2011. Remember that? The one that Regan Smith won when they had that little schmozzle on pit road after the race? Yeah. So that coming from Kevin Harvick, I mean, even he says that, yeah, it just looks like he misjudged it. And he had the best view of the whole thing, because he was right behind those guys. So then the rain starts coming down with 24 laps to go. It was light at first. And then the red flag is issued for rain with 20 laps to go. And then a wild fox wanders onto the track during the rain delay, which I thought was pretty funny. Watching on a Fox affiliate network, and a fox wanders onto the racetrack. That was pretty crazy. And then NASCAR calls the race official due to rain. which I thought was a little weird at first because it looked like it was just a light rain. But then as soon as they started going over to Hamlin to interview him, the rain really starts coming down. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much going to do it. So Denny Hamlin is the official winner of the Toyota 500K at Darlington. So for this race, we had 16 overall lead changes, which was more than the 400-mile race. This race was only 310 miles, although technically it was actually less than 300 miles because they ended it 28 laps short. Actually, it was a little less than that, but they ended it way short of the line of the official distance. And we had 6 pure lead changes overall, which was more than the 400-mile race, which only had 2. So pretty significant increase, I would say, for a shorter race, I might add, which I think is pretty crazy. But that's what happens with shorter races. It's much more frantic because you don't have as much time as you do in a normal 400 or 500-mile race. But here are the race results for the Toyota 500K. Your top 10 finishers as they stand. Denny Hamlin, it was 208 laps that they completed. Okay, so it was 20 laps remaining when the race was called. Denny Hamlin wins the race. Kyle Busch second, so it's a 1-2 for Joe Gibbs. Hamlin led basically the final 12 laps of the race. Kevin Harvick finishes third, keeping his top 10 streak for the season alive. Brad Keselowski comes home in 4th, Eric Jones in 5th. Joey Logano in 6th, Eric Almirola 7th, Jimmy Johnson 8th, Matt DiBenedetto 9th, and Martin Truex Jr. rounds out the top 10. So all 4 JGR cars finishing inside the top 10. So the point standings after 6 races, Kevin Harvick is on top of the pile, of course. Joey Logano in 2nd, Alex Bowman in the 3rd position. Denny Hamlin with his 2nd win pretty much completely secures his spot in the playoff. Chase Elliott in 5th, Brad Keselowski 6th, Eric Almirola in the top 10, even though we haven't really talked about him that a whole lot. Martin Truex Jr., this is just his 2nd top 10 of the year, but he's 8th in the point standings. Matt DiBenedetto continues to impress in the Wood Brothers car. Clint Boyer in 10th. Yeah, it's like, man, he hasn't really been doing all that good. He only has the 2 top 10s. He's been finishing high in a lot of stages, and he has 2 stage wins. Ryan Blaney in 11th, Jimmy Johnson 12th, Kyle Busch in 13th, so he's starting to climb out of that hole a little bit. His brother Kurt is right behind him in 14th, Eric Jones 15th, William Byron currently holding down the final playoff spot. Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, and Kyle Larson, who doesn't have a ride right now, round out the top 20 in the point standings after 6 races. As for my final rating for the Toyota 500K, this was a damn fun race. It was really goofy and wacky. We saw lots of passes, a lot more lead changes, a lot more pure lead changes. I would say this race definitely gets a thumbs up. My final rating for the Toyota 500K is an 8 out of 10. It was a damn good race. And, you know, Darlington hasn't really been known for that lately, but the last 2 races, I would say, would get a thumbs up. And that's how I feel about that. That's not going to be the case for this next race, though, which was the Coca-Cola 600, which has traditionally been absolute fucking garbage. Last year was definitely a big exception. Not going to see that this time around. So, let's go ahead and get into the review for the Coca-Cola 600. Hey, look at that! For the second review of this video, I shaved a little bit. Don't know what the fuck this is right here on my left cheek. And I also got my new Green Bay hat, so I think it looks cool. But I need to break it in anyways. I got this at the flea market. But anywho, let's go ahead and get started with the Coke 600 review. My impression of the race, it was absolute fucking garbage. Like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe how bad this race really was. And a lot of NASCAR tubers basically agreed. As far as the Gluck poll is concerned, it was actually even, with slightly more no's than yeses. I mean, if some people had some common fucking sense, they would have voted no on this race, because this race was trash. I mean, passing was at a premium, and even though the lead change number will show that it had 20 lead changes overall, that's actually very deceiving because, again, this is a 600-mile race. It was actually more than 600 miles, and it had just a slightly more lead changes than a race on Wednesday that was half the distance. You know, this race sucked ass. I mean, I know some people will be like, I mean, we really shouldn't be negative, but, you know, we should be happy that NASCAR is back. I am happy that NASCAR is back. My weekends have been fucking boring. You know? Without having the flea market to go to, which I do now, thank fucking God. And NASCAR is back, and I'm happy about that. Okay, I'm happy that NASCAR has finally returned. Even though they don't have any fans in the grandstands right now, I'm happy that the sport is back up and running again. That does not mean that they can't be criticized when it warrants it. Okay? And let's just be honest here. This race sucked. It did. Passing was at an absolute premium in this race. And most of the lead changes that we saw, again, there were 20 lead changes overall, but it was in a 600-mile race, and most of those lead changes were due to green flag pit stops. And the number of pure lead changes in this race was actually less than the 500-kilometer race at Darlington. Wrap your head around that shit for a minute. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into this. They actually had a qualifying session for this race. So, first qualifying session in this under this whole COVID-19 crap. So this is the only race that has 4 stages because of its length, 100 laps apiece, 150 miles. So a lot of points on the line in this race. So Kurt Busch actually was able to win the pole from Jimmy Johnson by like 7/1000 of a second or something like that. And this race was pretty crazy right from the get-go for the 11 team because Denny Hamlin actually lost some ballast from underneath his car, which are tungsten blocks that they put into the tubing of the framework of the car. And you might be asking yourself, some new fans might be asking themselves, well, why would they put that shit inside the car like that? Well, they have to meet the minimum weight requirements in order to race, which I believe is something like 3,400 pounds or something like that. And the reason why they have to meet that minimum weight is because, technically speaking, the lighter a car is, the faster it can go. And let's not forget that even though they've nerfed the engines a little bit, it's still 550 fucking horsepower. You know, that's a lot of freaking horsepower. And the lighter a car is, the less drag it's going to have, which will allow it to go faster. So that tungsten, fortunately, was under the pace laps when it fell out. And the thing about that is that carries a very severe penalty. If a car loses its ballast like that, then the crew chief, the car chief, and the team engineer face 4 race suspensions. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, damn, why such a significant penalty? Well, think about this. What do you think would happen? Because we saw also when the safety crew went out to clean it up, one guy tried to one-hand the tungsten and he couldn't do it because tungsten is a really dense metal. And it's a lot heavier than, say, lead, for instance. So he tried to one-hand it and he couldn't do it, so he had to pick it up with both hands. So it's a really, really heavy piece of metal. So imagine if that tungsten would have come out while the car was at speed. You know, imagine something that heavy flying out of a car going 180 miles an hour. That has the serious potential to cause serious injury or even death, because you get hit something like that by something like that, something that heavy at that speed. Just no. So NASCAR takes that really seriously. They know how much of a safety issue that can be, which is why the penalty is as severe as it is. And the other thing is, the driver is not penalized or fined. You might be saying, why not? Because it's not his responsibility to look after the car and make sure the car is up to spec. That's the crew chief's job, that's the car chief's job, and that's the engineer's job. Which is why the penalty is directed at them. Which I agree with. Which is why, the loose lug nuts rule doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, that's what's so fucking infuriating about the rule book sometimes. Is sometimes it actually does make sense, like in this case, the guys who have to look after the car, they get the huge penalty for it instead of the driver. But yet when the tire changer is the one that fucks up, the crew chief has to take the blame for it. That makes no fucking sense. But in this case, I do agree with how the penalty is structured, and it's a serious penalty because it could have serious consequences. So there's that. But the race finally begins. Kurt Busch leads on lap number 1. Martin Truex Jr. making the outside work early on. Hamlin was still on pit road getting the tungsten replaced, because that's the other thing. NASCAR would not allow them to return to the track until the tungsten was replaced. So, and plus they didn't bother, weighing the car or anything like that or taking it through inspection, because, he ended up like 10 laps down by the time it was all said and done. His race was essentially over before it even began. So, I think that's more than penalty enough. Joey Gase was already 2 laps down. We're 11 laps into this race, and Joey Gase was already 2 laps down. Like, get those fucking back markers off the track if they're not going to be up at speed. We had our first caution on lap 21, but it was a competition caution. Everyone comes in for service. Kurt Busch wins the race off pit road. There were a couple penalties on this one. Eric Jones was penalized for an uncontrolled tire. Chris Buescher and Daniel Suarez were penalized for their crews being over the wall too soon. So Kurt Busch leads on the restart. Johnson falls outside the top 10 after his car kind of jerks sideways on him off turn 2. That was exciting. And then we have our second caution on lap 49 for rain. Yes, Mother Nature makes yet another appearance. God. But her twin sister, Lady Luck, is going to also play an appearance later on in this race. The twin bitches of NASCAR. Anywho, we have to wait out a red flag that lasted about 68 minutes. So they go back under yellow. Everyone comes in for service. Bowman ends up taking just 2 tires. Martin Truex Jr. was the first off with 4 tires. And Bowman taking just 2 tires here, and especially considering what he was able to do with the rest of this stage, I think really got a lot of crew's attention, because it's like, wow, he only took just 2 tires and he's holding everybody off, So Bowman leads on the restart. We had some bump drafting going on throughout the field. And like I said, Bowman getting a lot of teams' attention, staying out front with just the 2 tires and actually holding it. But it also, kind of reiterates the fact that clean air is just way too overpowered with this aero package. So, because Kurt Busch is now not in the lead anymore, his car starts dropping to the field like a rock. Also showcasing how good the clean air was for his car. Bowman reported he was getting looser and looser in turn 3. Truex Jr. by Elliott for the 2nd position, and I made the observation at this point that it seemed like passing was at a premium, which it was. Christopher Bell actually gets punted by Ryan Blaney, which was actually similar to what happened at Vegas earlier this year. Same turn too, turn 3, but somehow he hangs on. Although this one he had to go all the way down to the apron and somehow held onto that car. If you don't think that Christopher Bell is not a wheelman, you're a fucking idiot. Okay? Because yeah, he's not gotten off to the best start in that 95 car, but goddamn if the guy can't wheel a race car. And I think he ended up getting a top 10 finish in this race anyways. So, take that for what you will. Then we get our 3rd caution on lap 97. Clint Bowyer hit the wall hard in turns 1 and 2. And you can even see it when he got out of the car. He was kind of bending over, trying to catch his breath. I think that really knocked the wind out of him. And the only good shot that they had was an onboard camera, and his car was going through turns 1 and 2, and then just hooked sharp right. Initially, we thought it was a right front tire that went down. As it turned out, he broke a right lower control arm in the suspension. That caused the car to veer to the right and into the wall. That was a hard hit, but thankfully, with the safety of these cars and of course the safer barriers, he was able to get out of his car relatively uninjured, because that was a hard ass hit. So Alex Bowman ends up winning stage 1 under caution, and that 2-tire strategy was looking really good at this point. So everyone comes in for service. Bowman wins the race off pit road. If there's a long run, though, typically you want to come in and get 4 tires, because fresh tires are still worth about a half a second a lap, and half a second is still half a second, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not the Darlington case where it's 2.5 seconds, but still, half a second is still significant. So Bowman leads the start of stage number 2. At this point, the race has been pretty boring. Stage 2 was pretty uneventful. Bubba Wallace reported that he had brake issues because the brake section went to the floor, but it turned out it was a tire hub failure, so that pretty much ended his day. Bowman was 1.4 seconds ahead of Truex at this point, and then from third on back, they were 7 or more seconds behind. I started getting 2018 flashbacks at this point. Harvick begins green flag pit stops on lap 150, so that just goes to show you how uneventful this stage was. Bowman pits from the lead on lap 159. Matt Kenseth gets nabbed for speeding. Johnson takes just 2 tires on the stop. Bowman reassumes the lead on lap 166. And at this point, I was kind of looking around on Twitter because I was like, this race has pretty much sucked ass so far. And pretty much every single NASCAR tuber, Eric Estep, Real Radman, those guys, NASCAR and MDK, they were all pretty much saying that the race was sucking ass. So we were all in concurrence on this one. And of course, that's when we learned that Boyer had suffered a lower control arm failure. With 5 laps to go in the stage, third place on down was 11 seconds back, and Bowman had basically a 7-second lead, which actually started dropping really quickly near the end of the stage. Although I think Bowman was just taking it easy at the end of the stage, which is why the lead dropped from like 7 seconds to 4 seconds. But I think he was just taking it easy because he knew that he had a big lead. Byron ends up passing Elliott for the 4th position. Bowman wins stage number 2. Yeah, this race was sucking some serious ass. Everyone comes in for service, of course, and Kyle Busch gets nabbed for speeding. Ouch. But he still had 300 miles left, and everyone came in under the halfway point to have a moment of silence for, of course, all the fallen troops. They got back underway. Stage 3, Bowman leads at the start. Johnson and Keselowski going back and forth for the 8th position. Truex challenges Bowman for the lead. Byron was right there as well. And Jones starts closing the gap to the front 3, and then we have our first pure lead change on lap 224. Yes, it took to lap 224 to finally get that first pure lead change. Bowman basically got stalled out by a lap car down the backstretch, so they tried to go around him. That basically slowed his car up, and Martin Truex Jr., drafting off of both of them, came up from behind and basically did the slingshot move down the backstretch, taking it 3 wide, and took advantage and took the lead away. That was really the only way, it seemed like, that people were able to get around the leaders when they got stalled out by a lap car. And with that, if that's always going to be the case, then that's going to be a serious problem. Ryan Newman reported that he was having a battery issue and pit on lap 238 to get that changed, and it was under green, so his race was essentially over. Jones starts challenging Bowman for second and takes it. Kurt Busch pit kicks off green flag stops on lap 254. Truex pits from the lead on lap 255 and then reassumes the lead on lap 264. And at this point, me and my stepfather were watching the race. He had fallen asleep, and I was just kind of like this, just trying to stay awake. But my God, I even tweeted afterwards. I was like, I was gonna be hunting some damn aspirin down after this race, because this was giving me a headache. Because this race was just boring as shit. But that's the Coke 600 for you. Guess last year was just an anomaly. Bowman was able to get back around Jones for the 2nd position. And then we get our 4th caution on lap 276 when Matt Kenseth spins in turn 2 and into the wall. Don't know if it was a tire going down or Everyone comes down pit road. Well, most everyone comes down pit road. Truex Jr. wins the race off with 2 tires. Logano, Harvick, and Elliott stay out and inherit the top 3 spots. So Logano leads on the restart. Elliott nearly loses it in turns 1 and 2, gets shuffled back into the pack. Harvick also gets swallowed up by the pack because didn't have that clean air. Logano, on the other hand, he stayed out and won the stage eventually. If this doesn't tell you how good clean air is, then you really must not be paying any attention. Something's gotta change with this fucking package, because this clean air bullshit, I mean, it has gotten so old that, you know, something needs to be done about it. Eric Jones and Christopher Bell make a little bit of contact off turn 2. But they were able to continue. Bowman gets by Truex for 2nd, Blaney by Truex for 3rd, and Johnson gets by for 4th, so Truex falls back a little bit. And Joey Logano wins stage number 3. Yawn. Everyone comes in for service. DiBenedetto takes just 2 tires, so gamble by him. So Matt DiBenedetto leads the start of stage number 4. Logano nearly loses it in turn 3 and stacks everybody up. DiBenedetto tries to hold MTJ, Johnson, and Byron at bay, and we get back-to-back pure lead changes because Truex Jr. actually led the first lap after the restart, but DiBenedetto managed to power back around him and keep the lead, at least for a little bit. So we actually got our second pure lead change on lap 309. A couple laps later, Truex was able to get around DiBenedetto. Excuse me. So we had our third pure lead change on lap 312. Bowman gets by Byron for the 4th position. Kurt Busch has to pit for a loose wheel. Tough break for him. DiBenedetto drops back to the 6th position. We get our 5th caution on lap 348, right before we get into green flag pit stops, when Joey Gase spins off turn 4. It was just a little spin. Everyone comes in for service, and Jimmy Johnson wins the race off pit road. And I was like, could this be Johnson's streak buster? Nope. Joey Logano gets nabbed for speeding. And to that, I say, because I'm not a fan of Joey Logano, so, oh well. So Johnson leads on the restart, and typically the leader has had the advantage on the restarts. Not in this case. Keselowski was able to get a good push from behind. I think it was from Bowen. It was either from Bowen or Byron. I can't remember. But he takes the lead on the restart. Bowman gets by Byron for the 5th position. Elliott gets by Keselowski for the lead with 37 laps to go. And that was our 4th and final pure lead change on lap 363. At this point, literally nothing happened from this point to the end of the race, and the announcers were basically talking about, you know, how Chase wanted to become the first Elliott to win the Coke 600, and he was just on his way to doing it. And it's like, man, Chase Elliott is going to win, and Chase Elliott and Elliott Nation is going to go fucking nuts. And then, Mother Nature's twin sister, Lady Luck, makes an appearance and basically slaps Hendrick Motorsports right in the sack. When I say Hendrick Motorsports, because this sequence of events just makes you think, man, Hendrick Motorsports must be fucking cursed or something. Because the 6th and final caution came out on lap 399. 2 fucking laps from the finish. And it was because of William Byron losing his left rear tire and spinning in turn 2. And then, for some weird ass reason, Chase Elliott decides to pit before the green white checker. Basically 8 cars stayed out, including Brad Keselowski, who inherited the race lead. Now, to Chase's credit, he managed to bull rush back up through the field in those 2 laps and ended up finishing 2nd. And I say that because I'll talk about something here in a minute. But why? Why would you stay out? I mean, you just essentially handed Brad Keselowski the win on a silver platter. And Alan, of course, I think Alan Gustafson was ultimately the one who made the decision, and evidently he was getting torn apart on the 9 Teams Twitter page. So some people actually calling for him to be fired. So, but Keselowski stays out, inherits the lead on the first green-white checkered attempt, with Jimmy Johnson on his right beside him. Brad K gets a good restart. Johnson tried his damnedest to get to him, but to no avail. And Brad Keselowski, probably the luckiest son of a bitch ever, wins the Coca-Cola 600. Basically got it handed to him on a silver platter. And of course, much like Alex Bowman, he's in a contract year with Penske. Doesn't know if he's going to be back with Penske next year. Of course, when you have a situation like this where you win one of the crown jewels, even though it got handed to him, basically he was still pretty much up front all night, but you know, it still doesn't change the fact that it basically got handed to him on a silver platter. But the bad times were not over for Hendrick Motorsports after that, because I think a lot of people were pretty much asleep by this point, but Bob Pockrass, who is a well-renowned NASCAR beat reporter, he reported on Twitter that Jimmy Johnson had failed post-race tech inspection. Apparently the rear end was not in accordance. So as a result, Jimmy Johnson was disqualified from the race and will finish in dead last and only earn 1 point. All of his stage points are wiped out. He only gets the 39 points that he earned for his second place finish wiped out. That is a big penalty. It really is. So he drops to last and he loses a shit ton of points, and puts him back into the danger zone as far as the playoff is concerned. So with Jimmy Johnson's disqualification from the runner-up spot, here are your top 10 official top 10 results. Brad Keselowski, of course, with the win. Chase Elliott ending up in the runner-up spot. And you gotta feel sick for Chase Elliott. And of course, you could see when he got out of the car, completely despondent. And Kyle Busch actually came over, to try to console him a little bit, And of course, they actually talked it out because, Chase Elliott was not exactly happy with Kyle Busch, but, they did meet and they, talked it out and stuff. So there's that. Ryan Blaney comes home in the third position, started 26th, ended up third. Kyle Busch in fourth, Kevin Harvick fifth, so he keeps his top 10 streak alive, which is extremely fucking weird, considering that Harvick was pretty much a non-factor for this entire race. But I think he was one of the guys who stayed out on the last caution before the green-white checkered, and that allowed him to move up. Truex Jr. finishes 6th at 87 laps, but is still without a top 5 finish in 2020, which is hard to believe. Kurt Busch, despite having to pit for a loose wheel, ends up 7th. That's a great recovery by that one team. Tyler Reddick ending up in the top 10. He is doing that 8-car proud, dude. He really is. Christopher Bell, he ends up in the 9th position, his first top 10 of the season. And how about Chris Buescher, continuing to prove his worth in that 17 car. He finishes in the 10th position. So, point standings after 7 races of 36. Kevin Harvick continues to lead the way, of course. Still the only guy with all top 10s in all races. Nobody else has even, the most anybody else has is 4 top 10s, and he has 7. Of course, he's led the most laps so far with 328 laps total. Joey Logano finishes second. Alex Bowman, I think he finished 20th in the 600, but of course he won the 2 stages, and that came with a boatload of points. Finished second in the 3rd stage, so that still came with a boatload of points for him. He's still 3rd in the championship. Chase Elliott, man, I gotta feel gutted for him. Had that 600 basically gift wrapped for him and fumbled the ball. He's still 4th in the championship though. Brad Keselowski with his win, of course, locks himself into the playoff, and he's 5th in the points now. MTJ, the first Toyota in the point standings, in 6th. Ryan Blaney 7th. Denny Hamlin in the 8th position, and he's tied with Kyle Busch for that spot. So Kyle Busch into the top 10 for the first time this season. Of course, there's probably going to be significant penalties for the 11 team. Not in terms of points, are fine, but crew chief, car chief, and team engineer suspensions for the ballast that came out. Eric Almirola still in the top 10 in points. Matt DiBenedetto in 11th. Kurt Busch 12th. Eric Jones 13th. Clint Boyer drops to 14th. Jimmy Johnson lost all those points and now drops into a tie for 15th with Tyler Reddick. So Tyler Reddick has 2 top 10s, and he is in the final spot in the playoff right now. William Byron, he has had, man, you want to talk about bad luck. William Byron, he has had some great runs this year, but due to just absolute shit luck, he has had nothing to show for it. Austin Dillon, Chris Buescher, who has 2 top 10s this year, and Bubba Wallace round out the top 20 in the point standings. As for my final rating for the Coca-Cola 600, this was the worst race of the year so far. There is no fucking question about it. This race sucked all kinds of ass crack. My final rating for this race, 2 out of 10. This race sucked ass. Lord have mercy. I guess last year really was an anomaly. But that's going to do it for today's edition of The Fuel, a doubleheader review. Reviewing the Toyota 500K at Darlington and then the Coke 600 last night. And then, of course, we got the Charlotte's 500-kilometer race this Wednesday night. And then I think this next Sunday, they're going to Bristol. So next week will be another doubleheader review. Look forward to that. But thank you very much for watching today's edition of The Fuel, special Memorial Day edition, here on Motorsport Monday. And until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. See you later.
You better like and subscribe or face the consequences. You have been warned.